The V-2 rocket, Hitler's so-called Vengeance Weapon 2, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. In the autumn of 1944, without warning, Londoners looked to the skies and saw a streak of fire followed by silence. And then devastation. No aircraft, no sirens. Only impact. The V-2 was the world's first ballistic missile, a weapon that soared nearly 60 miles high before plunging toward its target faster than the speed of sound. It carried a 1-ton explosive warhead, capable of leveling entire streets. But beyond its destruction, it was a symbol of desperation. Germany's last attempt to turn the tide of war through terror and technology. Developed under Wernher von Braun and his team at Peenemünde, on Germany's Baltic coast, the V-2 represented an extraordinary leap in rocket science. Engineers perfected liquid fuel propulsion, gyroscopic guidance, and supersonic flight, all innovations decades ahead of their time. It was a glimpse of the future, born amid the ashes of a collapsing Reich. But this marvel came at a horrific cost. When Allied bombers struck Peenemünde in 1943, production moved underground to the Mittelwerk complex in the Harz Mountains. There, over 20,000 forced laborers from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp died constructing these rockets, more than the number of civilians killed by their strikes. Each launch carried not only explosives, but the suffering of those who built it. Between September 1944 and March 1945, over 3,000 V-2s were fired at London, Antwerp, and Liège. Militarily, their impact was minimal. Psychologically, they were devastating. The V-2 offered no warning, no defense, and no hope of interception. Though it failed to save Nazi Germany, the V-2 rocket changed the course of history. Its design laid the foundation for the Cold War missile race and the space programs of both the United States and the Soviet Union. Born from vengeance, it became humanity's first step into the stars. Flying bomb. The V-1, flying bomb known to Londoners as the buzz bomb, was the world's first cruise missile, and it carried a sound that became synonymous with fear, a harsh, sputtering pulse jet engine. Echoed across the skies of southern England. You could hear it coming for miles, but when the noise stopped, when the buzzing suddenly cut out, you had only seconds before impact. Introduced in June 1944, just days after D-Day, the V-1 was Germany's attempt to strike back at Allied cities. Launched from ramps hidden along the French and Dutch coasts, each unmanned drone carried 850 kilograms of explosives and could travel at speeds over 400 miles per hour. Its flight path was guided by a simple autopilot system, primitive but deadly effective for its time. Thousands were launched in waves, turning the sky into a mechanical swarm of vengeance. The attacks killed over 6,000 civilians in Britain and wounded many more. Yet despite their horror, the V-1s were notoriously inaccurate, entire bombs missing London by miles. The Allies quickly adapted. Britain's new radar network tracked incoming bombs, while anti-aircraft guns and faster interceptors, like the Tempest and Spitfire Marotinth, hunted them down. In one of the war's most daring tactics, pilots even learned to tip V-1s mid-flight with their wingtips, sending them spiraling harmlessly into fields. Though crude and ultimately ineffective in changing the war's outcome, the flying bomb introduced something chillingly modern: the dawn of unmanned, automated warfare, a vision of conflict no longer fought face-to-face, but delivered from afar with machines as the messengers of death. Jet fighter. In the summer of 1944, the skies over Europe were filled with the familiar growl of propeller engines. Spitfires, Mustangs, Thunderbolts, locked in furious dogfights. Then, one day, Allied pilots saw something impossible: a silver blur slicing through the clouds at 540 miles per hour. It wasn't diving, it wasn't falling. It was flying, faster than anything they had ever seen. The Messerschmitt Me 262 had arrived. This was the world's first operational jet fighter, a machine years ahead of its time. Twin Jumo 004 turbojet engines gave it blistering speed, allowing it to climb and strike before opponents could even react. Armed with four 30mm cannons, it could shred a B-17 bomber in seconds. Allied pilots called it the Stormbird. Yet, despite its brilliance, the Me-262 became a symbol of Germany's self-destruction. Production was crippled by shortages of fuel, metals, and trained pilots. Hitler himself demanded it be converted into a fighter bomber, delaying its combat debut for critical months. By the time squadrons finally took to the air, Germany's fate was already sealed. Only a few hundred M262s ever saw combat. Their sudden speed terrified Allied air crews. But they couldn't turn the tide. Maintenance failures, hasty training, and sheer Allied numbers overwhelmed the revolution before it could take hold. Still, the Me-262 changed aviation forever. Its swept-wing silhouette and jet propulsion became the blueprint for the modern jet age. In the closing days of the Third Reich, its howl across the sky was both a glimpse of the future and the last gasp of a dying empire. Bouncing bomb. By the spring of 1943, Britain faced a problem: how to cripple Germany's industrial heart without obliterating civilian cities. Deep inside the Ruhr Valley, vast hydroelectric dams powered factories, producing steel, munitions, and aircraft. Destroy them, and the Nazi war machine would falter. But the dams were massive, reinforced, and heavily defended. Conventional bombing was useless. Then came Barnes Wallis, an unassuming British engineer with an unorthodox idea. What if a bomb could skip across water, like a stone on a pond, evading torpedo nets to strike the dam wall directly? His weapon, a spinning, drum-shaped bomb, would bounce across reservoirs, sink beside the wall, and detonate at a precise depth. The concept was as daring as it was improbable. On the night of May 16, 1943, RAF 617 Squadron, handpicked for the task, roared toward Germany in Lancaster bombers, flying barely 100 feet above the water. Searchlights raked the sky. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from the valley. One by one, the crews released their strange spinning bombs. At 12:28 a.m., the Muna Dam burst. A wall of water surged through the valley, flooding towns and crippling power supplies. But victory came at a terrible cost. 8 of 19 aircraft were lost, and 53 airmen never returned. Operation Chastise became legend, not because of its scale, but because of its ingenuity and courage. The bouncing bomb proved that in a war of monstrous machines, human creativity could still rewrite the rules of destruction. Magnetic mine. In the closing months of 1939, a new and invisible threat began haunting the seas around Britain. Merchant ships, vital arteries of the nation's supply chain, were vanishing in sudden, unexplained explosions. No torpedo wakes, no periscopes breaking the surface. Just calm water, then devastation. The cause soon emerged: Germany's magnetic mine, a silent weapon resting unseen on the seabed. Unlike traditional contact mines, this one detonated when it sensed the magnetic field of a passing ship's steel hull. It could be dropped from aircraft into shallow harbors, rivers, or shipping lanes, striking without warning. For weeks, the Royal Navy was baffled and desperate. Convoys were halted, ports were paralyzed. Britain's lifeline of food and fuel seemed on the verge of collapse. Then came a stroke of luck. A live mine, recovered intact from the mudflats of the Thames estuary. Risking their lives, British engineers dismantled it and uncovered its magnetic trigger system. Within days, the counterattack began. Ships were fitted with electrical cables to degauss their hulls, cancelling their magnetic signatures. What began as a near-invisible catastrophe turned into a triumph of scientific ingenuity. The battle beneath the waves had been fought and won, not with guns, but with magnets and math. Radar jammer. By the early 1940s, the battlefield had expanded beyond land, sea, and sky into the invisible realm of radio waves. Radar, short for radio detection and ranging, had become the nervous system of modern warfare, guiding interceptors, tracking bombers, and watching the coastlines of Europe. But as one side learned to see through the air, the other learned how to make it blind. Germany's first move came with Nickerbeam, a network of intersecting radio beams used to guide Luftwaffe bombers over blacked-out British cities. In response, Allied scientists jammed the beams, feeding false signals and sending enemy aircraft miles off course. It was the beginning of an invisible duel, a war of wits fought in static and silence. Then came Window, one of Britain's simplest yet most effective countermeasures. Long strips of aluminum foil, dropped from bombers, that flooded radar screens with thousands of phantom echoes. Entire squadrons vanished into a blizzard of false targets. By 1945, victory wasn't just measured in tanks or tonnage, but in control of the electromagnetic spectrum. Every jammed frequency, every ghost signal, marked a silent triumph. The age of electronic warfare had begun. A battle fought not with bullets, but with beams. Enigma machine. Long before battles were fought on beaches or skies, another war raged, one of logic, secrecy, and silence. Germany's Enigma machine was its unseen weapon, a small, typewriter-sized device of rotors and electrical circuits. It turned ordinary messages into unreadable strings of letters. Each day, its internal settings changed, creating billions of possible combinations. To German commanders, Enigma was unbreakable, the perfect shield for their armies and U-boats. For years, Allied intelligence could only watch as convoys were ambushed and battle plans anticipated. The Enigma's code dictated the rhythm of the war itself. But in a quiet English estate called Bletchley Park, a new kind of soldier was fighting back. Mathematicians, linguists, and engineers. At the center was Alan Turing, a brilliant, eccentric thinker whose invention, the electromechanical bomb machine, began unraveling Enigma's complexity. Each intercepted message became a puzzle piece in a race against time. When the code finally cracked, the results were transformative. The Allies could now anticipate U-boat wolf packs, troop movements, and even Hitler's plans. The secret intelligence born from Enigma's defeat was codenamed Ultra, and it remained hidden for decades after the war. Historians later estimated it may have shortened the conflict by up to 2 years. The Enigma story was more than cryptography. It was a battle of human intellect against mechanical arrogance, proving that in war, the sharpest weapon of all can be the human mind. Sound cannon. In the dying months of the war, as Allied forces closed in from every direction, Nazi Germany turned to desperation, a final surge of so-called Wunderwaffen, or miracle weapons. Among them was one of the strangest inventions ever conceived, the sound cannon. Engineers envisioned a weapon that could kill with nothing more than concentrated sound. Using 2 large parabolic reflectors, it would focus shock waves, created by explosive gas mixtures, into a deadly acoustic beam. In theory, it could rupture internal organs, disable engines, and scatter enemy troops, all without firing a single bullet. But in practice, it was science fiction made real too soon. The weapon's short range, massive power demands, and vulnerability to attack doomed it before it ever reached the battlefield. The prototypes sat in testing grounds, eerie relics of a collapsing regime that had run out of time, fuel, and reason. The sound cannon became a symbol of Nazi Germany's final delusion, where innovation blurred into obsession. It was the endpoint of a philosophy that saw technology not as a tool for progress, but as a last resort for dominance. From rockets to radars, from codes to cannons, WW2 transformed science into a weapon, and its echo still shapes the modern world. The race for secret weapons in World War II changed history. From the roar of rockets to the silence of codebreakers, some inventions reshaped the world. Others never left the drawing board. But together they revealed one truth. The greatest battles aren't always fought with armies, but with ideas. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden weapons of war, there's so much more to explore. Subscribe to WW2. Explains for more deep dives into the machines, missions, and minds that defined the world's greatest conflict.